Good day, ladies and gentlemen. I just read The Lion, Son of the Forest by Mike Brooks, and I have quite some mixed feelings about it. So the premise is as follows. The lion has finally awoken from his slumber and through mysterious means arrives on a forest planet taken over by a bunch of chaos worshippers. Here he meets one of the Fallen, who is protecting a group of human survivors, and he teams up with him to overthrow the cultists and thereafter to protect the remnants of humanity to the best of their abilities. Throughout the rest of the novel, the lion goes on a quest to expand his protectorate as well as to gather as many of his fallen sons as possible. He learns what really happened at Caliban all those years ago, and thus he wants to reconcile with his sons as well as to give the Fallen a chance to redeem themselves. There's also a Chaos Wizard who forms the big bad of the book, but he's not really worth talking about any further. Now this book does one thing very nicely, and that is presenting a very well thought out idea of what the Fallen are like and what they have been up to during the past centuries. There's a wide variety of Fallen in this book, ranging from a guy who set up a pirate gang to a couple who have just continued their role as protectors of humanity, from full-on chaos worshippers to people who've resigned being a space marine altogether. Reading about these various Fallen was highly entertaining, and their culture and mentality was often very well thought out. The story itself was pretty entertaining as well. It is one of those RPG style video game storylines, and if you've been following this channel for a while, you know I'm a sucker for those. The lion basically goes on a Total War Imric campaign, but instead of gathering dragons he collects Fallen, while slowly expanding his sphere of influence. I also quite like the heavy amount of thoughts and dialogue we see in this book, which are only accentuated with some action scenes here and there. Don't get me wrong, there are some action scenes and they were pretty cool, especially the major void battle in the middle of the book, but this is definitely not a bolter porn. It never relies on filler fight sequences or feels too action heavy, so thus far a lot of good stuff. The portrayal of the lion, however, could have been much better. The lion in this book initially suffers from a lot of memory loss. He basically starts off as Joe Biden in 40k and has absolutely no idea who he is, let alone where. This was a cool concept initially, but the book doesn't handle it very well. The lion basically remembers everything, except for the 2 or 3 scenes where the book wants to make a point of him not knowing something anymore by showing him reacting to regaining the memory. It is so utterly random. At some points the lion is making obscure references about his past, or at least in universe they would be obscure of course, yet in the next moment he struggles to remember what a Horus Heresy is. Another missed opportunity is his personality. In this book we see a lion that is a lot more mature. We see a lion that clearly has reflected on both his actions during the Crusade as well as who he is as a person. But his entire character arc is not in the novel whatsoever. He just all of a sudden went from the Nazi dictator we saw in the Heresy to having the personality of a generic fantasy hero. The book tries to show this a bit by having him reflect on things and talking about how his past self would have done things differently. But this falls a bit flat because he is supposed to be suffering from severe memory loss at the same time. I also just felt like he was very inconsistent as a character. There are scenes where he is being progressive even by today's standards, and there are others where he's basically a mature version of the old lion, realizing he's a hunter, but that he should better pick his enemies rather than going all lone wolf style. The former turns him into a boring protagonist that would fit better in a Marvel movie than the 41st millennium, while the latter was actually pretty interesting to read about. But outside of the inconsistent portrayal of the main character, my biggest issue with this book is that Mike Brooks' writing style really doesn't fit the tone of this book. Brooks' prose is very much tongue-in-cheek, there are references and jokes literally everywhere. It is almost reminiscent of Emperor TTS and how meta and memey it is. Now for orcs this works very nicely, as can be seen in the excellent War Boss as well as in Brutal Cunning, a book loved for its portrayal of greenskins just as much as it's hated for its dumb portrayal of Admech. However, for a book that is supposed to be about a lion who is struggling with the fact that his body is aging, the fact that his legion is broken, as well as his current belief that the Imperium has fallen and that he is literally the last Primarch alive, the writing style really doesn't fit that. Why is the lion joking about how much of an idiot Russ is when he is described to supposedly miss him at other points? How can he constantly shit talk about the Great Crusade and then supposedly be in tears about how the Emperor's work is in ruin? For crying out loud, there's a part where the planet the lion is defending is about to be blasted to bits, and he starts to make a joke about how planets are shit at dodging. This book really can't decide whether it wants to be a comedy or an action adventure, and thus really fails to do both. Brooks in his memeing or political commentary also sometimes flat out ignores logic or lore. The Fallen, for an example, constantly joke about the traitor Primarchs, but for a bunch of people who spend the entire heresy in isolation on Caliban, this makes little sense. For an example, they joke about Conrad's visions a lot, like it's just common knowledge, but how in the Emperor's name did the Fallen ever learn of this? So all in all, I'm very conflicted as to what to rate this novel, and thus will settle for 3 out of 5 big pussies. I really like the more introspective and dialogue-based storyline, as well as the world building in regards to the Fallen. However, the endless flow of references and out-of-place comments or jokes constantly broke my immersion and really prevented me from having any serious emotional investment in this story. Overall, I didn't mind reading it, but I don't think I'll give it another read. For Dark Angel fans, it's a recommendation, but for anyone else, there are better books available. So I think 3 stars is where it should be. Then finally, I do want to mention that a lot of the modern stuff is not touched upon in this novel. For an example, the Primaris, or Robute's return, or even the fate of the traitor Primarchs all remain unknown to the Lion here. Similarly, the modern Dark Angels are not in it whatsoever. This is not a point of criticism necessarily, but just an FYI for those Dark Angel lore fans out there. Anyways, that's all I got for you today.
If you liked this video, please consider subscribing and click ringing the bell to appease the Great Horned Rat. For more lore content, please check my main channel and leave any book recommendations in the comments down below. I gotta get back to reading the next book.